What's up, guys? Just wanted to talk a little bit about restrictor plate racing. And most recently, Jamie McMurray had a huge, scary flip on the track at Talladega. Um, so I'm glad he's okay. He's my favorite driver. You guys know that. But regardless of who it involved, you never want to really see stuff like that. It's really scary. But I'm gonna just jump from that right to the subject of restrictor plate racing. Now, those of you who've watched videos in the past, maybe you've seen where I've talked a little bit about it before, and I'm not a fan of restrictor plate racing for several reasons. One, yeah, it's dangerous, and I think it's almost unnecessarily dangerous. Um, in terms of when you think about it, at least when I think about it, in all honesty, do we really need these restrictor plate races to be part of NASCAR? Now, I know that's going to flip a lot of people out. This is just my opinion, um, you know, but I could do without it, in all honesty. As the years have gone on and NASCAR's evolved and changed, um, we've lost some great races, from some iconic racetracks. I can still remember when they ran at Rockingham, and I'd love to see Rockingham back on the circuit. I know that's not going to happen, but I'm just throwing that out there as a scenario. I would much prefer to see that type of stuff or those type of races to what we get when we go to Talladega and Daytona. Now, Daytona is iconic, and of course, you're not going to do away with the Daytona 500 or anything like that. And in all honesty, the, the things that I'm talking about, they're never going to happen. It is what it is. You got these two iconic tracks, Talladega and Daytona. They're part of the circuit. They're part of NASCAR, and they're not going away. So that's not going to happen. So regardless of what my opinion is, you know, it's not going to change anything. And I don't want people to get all upset over nothing. It's really just an opinion. But there's several reasons why I don't like restricted plate racing. And it really, aside from the danger of it and stuff like that, it's I gotta be if you gotta be honest. Even if you're a huge fan, you gotta admit restricted plate racing is incredibly boring. I mean, when you break it down and you look at these races, they range close to 4 hours, and in when you add up whatever excitement's in the races, it doesn't amount to much compared to the race as a whole. There's a very tiny percentage of it where there's something happening that's exciting, and it's just the very nature of restrictor plate racing. That's just the way it is. You got these massive packs and conga lines of cars that are just following each other lap after lap, and all they're really doing is biding time. So you're just clicking off laps, waiting for that moment where you feel like, okay, now it's time. Now it's time to race. Now it's time to make a move. That's not racing to me. You know, 100% of the race should be racing, actual racing where you're really trying to make passes, and there's all kinds of things happening. There's very little, even in terms of strategy at these tracks. You're just trying to survive. And these races, when they are exciting, they're usually exciting for the wrong reasons, like a big, massive car wreck, or the big one, as they call it. And I think that if you walk away from these races and the most exciting things you talk about are wrecks, to me, that's not a good thing. It should be about the racing. And very little about plate races are about racing. It's about avoiding the big one, or something happening that will cause you to fall out of the pack. And if you're not part of this pack, you're gone. You're left in the dust. because it's all aero dependent racing. And in all honesty, I don't really know what can be done to change it. It would have to be something really aggressive, and people would go bananas because anytime NASCAR tries to improve the sport or do something different or try to address a problem, people always complain. It's like you can't do anything right. And I do commend NASCAR for trying to always being active and not being afraid to make changes, to try to improve things. Are they always successful? No. But the point is, they don't just sit back. Now, I'm going to make a quick comparison to another sport that, in my opinion, has been dying a slow death, and that's baseball. Baseball used to be so big for me. I mean, going back many years ago, and I grew up. You know, I used to know every player on every team. That's how big I was into baseball at one point in my life. But as time went on, I just slowly fell out of being the type of fan I used to be. I still follow it, but I don't follow it like I used to. And I can't honestly tell you the last time I saw a full 9 inning baseball game because, in all honesty, it's dull and the pacing of the game is dull. It's not like football where it's very exciting and it's every down is important. Um, or even basketball. It's like baseball is more. It's a slower game. It's more cerebral. There's a lot going on, but it's like it's a game you take in like a fine wine rather than something like football where it's just in your face constantly. And it's the biggest reason that baseball's been dying this slow death, and it is dying a slow death because if you look at the attendance, it's way down and it has been for many years. There's a couple reasons for that. One of them, and it was for me, was the steroid scandal. Um, when Sammy Sosa and McGuire were going at it, and that was for me the peak of the excitement for baseball, and it's like it hit such a peak, and then it just went down just as sharply. It was such a sharp turn that it took, and I got turned off by the sport because one, the steroid scandal and all that stuff, it took a lot away from me, from the accomplishments and the things that I saw happening in the sport. For me, it was like, when I grew up, I remember players, and yeah, I know a lot of people say, yeah, they used to use amphetamines and this and that. You can't compare that kind of stuff to steroids. It's night and day. And you see these guys, they just jacked up from one season to the next. They don't even look like the same person. And a guy can go from hitting 15 homers a year to like hitting 50. I remember that stuff. You know, I remember a guy named Brady Anderson with the Orioles, and then all of a sudden this guy was hitting 50 homers a year, and it was obvious. Remember Lenny Dykstra and a lot of players. There's a big list of players, but steroids, and to me, it just ruined the game, and it just and it took old historical accomplishments and it just made them meaningless. Like Hank Aaron's record, and then Roger Maris. That was a big deal when Maris hit 61 homers, and that record stood for such a long time. And the reason it was special is because, you know, he did it straight. It was honest. And now we see these guys on steroids, and then you saw McGuire and Sosa and Bonds, and these guys they made his record look like child's play. And then you take into account the steroids and all that. It's just, how is that good for the sport? It's not, and it's unfair to the players from the past who had their accomplishments and they worked for it cleanly. So that's part of the reason why baseball started dying a slow death. And you can see it in the attendance at these stadiums. You see these stadiums, there are so many empty seats. I remember when you couldn't get a seat at some of these games. And now there's empty seats. You see it even on TV. The seats that are usually packed, which is right behind the catcher, you wouldn't see too many empty seats. Now you watch a game on TV, a lot of empty seats in the background. And at the new Yankee Stadium, when that stadium first opened up, the seats were really expensive, and it was hard to get a good seat. And these seats were going for hundreds of dollars. And now you see empty seats everywhere. You can just walk up to the ticket window and get a really good seat. So the attendance is down. And I think a big part of it had to do with the steroids. And then the other thing is baseball's refusal to change. They're so adamant about change, about not changing and not tinkering with the sport at all, that you lose. As old timers were dying off, you weren't getting new fans. So you have that mentality of we resist change, but then you're not attracting these young kids to come and watch the sport and be a part of it and follow it, because it's so long and dull and boring, and they could do so many things to speed up the game and make it more exciting. And of course, the steroid problem, you gotta, they've clamped down on it a little bit, but there's still guys failing all the time. They're finding loopholes around it. It's just, I think baseball waited too long, and now the attendance is really, I don't know how do you get these people back? And in a way, that's, I could see that with the restrictor plate racing and NASCAR and stuff. There's nothing they can really do in terms of making minor changes that don't upset people. That's really gonna fix the how boring it is. And then you got these packs, and it's just lap after lap, and all you're really trying to do is survive, because nothing really exciting happens outside of the wrecks until the last 2 or 3 laps. You might as well not even, you can tune in at the last couple of laps, and then you pretty much get 95% of the excitement from the race. You'll get it in those last 2 or 3 laps, because anything can happen. You could pick a name out of a hat. Anybody can win. You just have to have the right hole open up for you, and get some help. If you get somebody willing to push, and you got a hole open up, you can win. And I've seen guys come from 25th, 30th place in one lap to the front. How many times do you see the end of the race, a guy finish in the top five that you didn't hear about him all day long? He was all the way in the back all day. All of a sudden he finished top five. That kind of stuff, for me, it takes away from the legitimacy of the race, because everything is so aero dependent and dependent on luck, that it just really kills it for me. And I can't sit there for 3, 4 hours and watch these guys just lap after lap, and it's just this conga line. Nothing. I don't know what to say, man. It's really boring. It's dangerous, and it comes down to, what do you do about it? What can NASCAR do? And in all honesty, I don't really have a clear answer, because it's been this way for such a long time. And they have tried to make little changes, but it doesn't seem to work. And the biggest change I've seen was when they were doing the 2-car tandem, and you could see 2 cars that were actually faster than a whole row of cars, that where they would push each other. And that was like that for like maybe 2 years. And then NASCAR decided, we got to do away with this. They made some changes. I don't remember exactly what they did technically to stop that, but you don't see that anymore. But there was a very brief period where 2 cars by themselves could be faster than a whole row of cars, which I've never seen before. And I couldn't believe what I was watching. Even the announcers, when they were during a telecast would be like, I can't believe what I'm watching. This is crazy. Now, that also made things dangerous too, because you had these two people working together and then doing switch. They would have to switch every couple of laps because the car that was pushing would overheat. And then while that was happening, you had to be careful because someone else was having a big run. And so it was dangerous. It was weird. It was just, even though it was different, to me, it was just as bad as what we have now. It's not, there's something artificial about that type of racing. I enjoy normal racing where it's up to the driver, the team, the crew chief, the decisions made, the adjustments made. And, a big reason why you have these massive packs is because you don't have to really let off the gas at these tracks unless you're in a bad spot and you're about to hit somebody. You can hold the throttle down wide open all the way around. So now these cars are completely dependent on aerodynamics. It's just, I don't know, man. I do not enjoy these races, and I know a lot of people love them. I just don't. I don't. For me, it's more like just a big gamble, and you can pick just about anybody's name out of a hat if they're lucky enough to have the right person pushing, and a hole opens up for them. They can get a great finish. So I don't know what the answer is. Now, I think that maybe just adding something like a wicker bill to the roof of the car, like I think we saw that. I don't know if it was with the Xfinity series a few years ago. Um, and I know people would have a fucking heart attack because it's ugly or whatever. But what it did was, it was just this flat piece of metal across the top of the roof, and it would punch a hole in the air and make a bigger hole for the cars behind. And then it was supposed to provide more passing opportunities. Also, it would create some drag on the car. And I do think these cars do need something to drag them a little bit. For me, the biggest problem is you don't have to let off the gas. And you got to do something where these guys cannot run wide open. I don't know what that is. I don't have those answers. But something needs to happen where you got to let off the gas in the corners. And then that would separate guys, you know, the guys with really good cars or making good adjustments to the other guys. This is how it is at all tracks. It comes down to handling more than anything else. And get that aero dependency to be less and more about handling. Now, whatever it is, it would have to cause the drivers to let off the gas. And I think that would create better racing, and it would eliminate these conga lines. And then you would have guys constantly passing each other and then gaps between the cars. And I think that's how it used to be back in the old days. And when I say old days, I'm going way back to the 70s and stuff like that. The cars weren't as aero dependent, and you didn't have these conga lines. You had the really good cars separate themselves, and it was more about handling. So I don't know, man. It would probably require doing something to the car that people wouldn't like. And again, I don't pretend to have the answers. This stuff is above my head. There are much smarter people who would have to figure that out. But you have to break up these conga lines somehow. And when you have guys, when you can run at a track wide open, lap after lap, and you never have to let your foot off the gas, that's a problem. And I think that's the biggest problem. So you got to do something to these cars to make the drive. So in other words, to make the car uh, not handle as well, and where you have to let off the gas a little bit at least in the corners. And then some cars that handle better will have an advantage, and those that don't will fall to the back. And you can't just have a conga line of 30 cars and where they're all just attached. Because no matter how bad the handling of the car is at these tracks, the fact that they are locked by aerodynamics, it just keeps the pack there anyway. And then you don't have opportunities to pass unless somebody happens to move out of the way. It's all bad. And these restrictor plate races are not going anywhere. They're not going to just take them off the circuit, and so we're kind of stuck with restrictor plate racing as it is. And the worst part of it is that they all count for points. And you can run great all day and then just get caught up in something that's not your fault. It's just so many negative things about restrictor plate racing. I've never really been into it. I don't get it. Um, I think it's the most boring form of racing. When a restrictor plate race weekend comes, I'm like, I can't wait for it to be over and then just get back to real racing again. And yeah, I know the Daytona 500 is a big deal, and these races are a big deal to people, but I don't know, man. It's something that NASCAR has to seriously think about doing something about, but unfortunately, it's going to require something drastic. It's not going to be a simple little adjustment, you know. And I don't know what it is. I don't have that answer, but that's my opinion about the state of restrictor plate racing in NASCAR. I'm not sure if there's a clear cut answer. That's for an engineer in that arena to figure out. But I just, whatever it is, has to break these packs up, and it has to get it to the point where you can't run wide open. And unfortunately, these tracks are so big and so wide that it would take something really drastic to create that issue where you can't run wide open. I mean, you can't run wide open at most tracks. Like, go to Dover, you have to let off the gas in the corner, and it's about handling. And that's the key to great racing. And if you could get it to where it's all about handling and not all this aerodynamic shit, then you'll have better racing. What would cause that? I don't know. But as long as you have this where it's all aerodynamics, you're gonna get this boring racing. And really, the only time people talk about anything that's quote unquote exciting is when there's a wreck. That's a problem. So those are my thoughts on it. What do you guys think? And I look forward to your comments.